You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that is honest, reveals the facts, truth, and statistics, and does not mess around. Follow me, Taylor Phillips, on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Email me at TaylorGatorPhillips14@yahoo.com. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313, and go to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, and join our group with the exact same name. The Michigan Sports Truth podcast is also available on iHeartRadio and SoundCloud. Also a subsidiary of Sports Radio Detroit, thus available on iTunes and Podbean. The views expressed by the host of this podcast are not opinion-based or for entertainment purposes. They are actually facts and truth, no matter if other people like it or not. It is the Michigan Sports Truth, and nothing can ever stop it from being correct.
Hey there, Michigan sports fanatics, and welcome to episode 238 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, another installment of the Football in the Mitten preview. I'm Taylor Phillips, along with Ed Smith. And Ed, the curse has finally been broken. This may not be football, but the Chicago Cubs in baseball have finally won the World Series for the first time since 1908. The curse of the Billy Goat is gone. Can you believe that?
In many ways, yes and no. Yes, because this is when you have a talented team as they had, mixed with a great manager in Joe Maddon-Doe, let's admit, he had a very, very bad night last night, but still, his players bailed him out, plus the great building mind that is Theo Epstein as general manager. You add those things together, of course, it's not too much a surprise, but when you think about how long that team, that franchise, and that fan base has gone through, generation after generation, literally a whole century's worth without experiencing that ultimate glory. It puts a whole lot of things into perspective. And what better way for this drought to end than to have it end with as epic as a game as you would have seen and felt and lived through that we saw last night in Game 7. I don't know if I'll ever see, when you think about the circumstances, the situations, the emotions, the narratives, the subplots, that everything that was included and in between from those two teams, obviously Cleveland's side of history, and those passionate fan bases, and the drama, just flat out drama that was taking place just throughout that game, let alone that whole series or this whole season. That was one of the finest baseball games I probably will ever see, and definitely one of the more intense yet spectacular and amazing sports moments I have the joy to say that I witnessed last night. So great baseball game, great sports game, period. One that will definitely go down in the annals of history. But we digress. We still have a lot of things to cover from our side of things here in the Mitten, so let's get to it.
Yeah, we're going to preview Maryland at Michigan, Michigan State at Illinois, Central Michigan at Miami, Ohio, Western Michigan at Kent State, which will be a quickie, and Eastern Michigan at Ball State. And of course, the Lions at Vikings, Week 9 of the National Football League in 2016, followed by 5 questions. But first, the undefeated and second-ranked Michigan Wolverines in the AP poll and third in the college football playoff poll.
Touchdown, Michigan!
They play at home at the Big House in Ann Arbor, Michigan Stadium, against these Maryland Terrapins, who are 5-3 and 2-3 in the Big Ten. That kicks off Saturday at 3:30 on ESPN. Michigan may have beaten Michigan State last week, but they need to get back to their form that they were going into last week, considering last week's matchup with the Spartans in East Lansing was closer than we thought. And the Wolverines' defense had allowed a national best 207.9 yards per game before they played in East Lansing, and then they allowed 401 yards and 23 points against the 2-6 Spartans, pushing the Wolverines to 231.3 yards per game. And the Wolverines' offense, who put up at least 40 points in 6 of their games this season, scored 32 against the Spartans defense. The Terrapins have lost 3 of their last 4 games, including a 42-36 defeat at the hands of the upstart Indiana Hoosiers last Saturday, where they allowed the most points in their season. Now the players to watch here, senior quarterback Perry Hills, 93 out of 140 for 1,070 yards, 10 touchdowns against 3 interceptions. Sophomore running back Ty Johnson, 624 yards, 10.4 average per carry, and 4 touchdowns. True freshman Lorenzo Harrison with 575 carrying yards, 7.3 average, no touchdowns. And sophomore wide receiver DJ Moore with 28 receptions for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Also, defensively for the Terps, junior weak side linebacker Shane Cockerell has a team best 73 tackles and junior outside linebacker Jesse Anibonem leads the squad with 5.5 sacks. Now, Ed, Michigan wasn't so dominating against the Spartans to sum it all up, whereas Maryland fought the good fight against Indiana, but lost in the end. Going into that matchup, Michigan has to get back to their dominating form, and Maryland is fighting desperately for a bowl game.
There's a couple ways this thing can go. Either way, I see it favoring Michigan. Now, there is one thing to take into account here. Former last year's defensive coordinator, now this year's Maryland head coach, DJ Durkin, will be returning to the Big House to take on his old comrade and close friend Jim Harbaugh. So that's one, and that was an interesting matchup you want to point to. There it is right there, coaching matchup. But other than that, in a more serious matter, though, if there's anything that you could hang your hat on, is the fact that they seem to have a good running back in Ty Johnson. I mean, you mentioned the fact that he's got 60 carries and that equals out to 624 yards, which means he's averaging a first down every time he's touching the ball. That's astounding. But then you have to take into consideration the type of teams that Maryland has played thus far in their schedule. We're talking Purdue. We're talking, of course, Michigan State. And they had a tough loss against Indiana last week. So, this is a tremendous step up in talent that Maryland is going to be facing in all phases of the game. What I'm most interested in seeing is not how Michigan's defense will be, because I think it's expected to see that we'll be seeing a much better defense performance for multiple reasons. We'll get to that in 5 questions later, by the way. Hint, hint, plug, plug. But for Michigan, I'm really interested to see how can their offense, because I thought for the most part, even though I think they took their foot up off the gas pedal in the fourth quarter, their offense looked pretty damn good last week. Very cohesive, very together. In a situation you would think, hey, on the road, in-state rival, possible hostile crowd, facing possible lot of pressure, blitzing, whatnot. And I thought that offense held themselves together very well. So I want to see, and they continue that even more so as we, get ready to get to the nitty-gritty with games against Iowa, Indiana, and, of course, Ohio State coming up. Can their offense maintain this sort of momentum that they seem to be building week by week? Obviously, yes, feasting on the cupcakes that's on their schedule, but also stepping up when you needed to do against the legit teams. Need I mention the Wilton Speight bomb to Tamar Darbo, scored the game-winning touchdown against Wisconsin as a prime example. Speight in general, how he has performed. He's made very few minimal mistakes while putting himself and his team in great enough spots where they can capitalize, make big plays, score points, and take that pressure off on their man of defense. So I really want to see, and also when you add in the fact that, like I mentioned, DJ Durkin is, of course, the head coach of Maryland. Obviously, defensive-minded coach, as well as evident of him being the defensive coordinator last year for the Wolverines. Does he have something up his sleeve, a trick or so, or that he knows that could be a potential weakness for Michigan? Would it be regarding the offensive line, how they stack on certain packages and whatnot? Does he have that type of info that could help them? That's one thing to look out for. Obviously, Maryland is not where they want to be right now. But listen, they were a 3-9 team last year. Now here they are trying to fight for to get to a possible bowl game. It won't be that easy. But I think you got to commend the job that DJ Durkin has done so far. And knowing that he's a defensive-minded coach, knowing he's going to get his players there eventually, keep an eye on Maryland to be one of, I guess you could say, hopeful to develop into a second-tier team. Obviously, nowhere near to be with the big boys, the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Michigan States, the Wisconsins, that type of tier. But under DJ Durkin's leadership, I expect Maryland to eventually ascend to a higher level than what they are right now. That's the faith I have in Durkin. But getting back to this game, though, it's definitely, it will take a near perfect effort for Maryland to make this a close game, let alone a potential upset. Because I see a Michigan defense who you know what, in some ways they got a wake-up call last week. The whole team, I think, as a whole, got a little bit of a wake-up call because, again, they got very complacent in that fourth quarter. So I think they're going to be coming out definitely to make a statement in more ways than one in this game. I'm very interested to see the matchups between how DJ Durkin will get his defense lined up against Michigan's offense. Another thing that intrigues me, though, is a certain key factor that might point in Michigan's favor is running the ball. If you look up the stats under the S&P Plus factor, which you can look up for at footballoutsiders.com, that's one of the numerous analytical sources regarding team value and player value and efficiency as a whole in certain metric statistics and categories. And this potential factor, the fact that Michigan does a better job at finishing drives, does a much better job at protecting the football, as well as clearly showing a clear advantage in running the ball with their offense versus what Maryland could do in terms of stopping, let alone getting things going on their end. This looks to be not only a win, obviously, but a bounce-back win, if you want to call it that, a dominating win, and a good way to set the table for the November schedule. Because this is the money month. You finally arrive in November. You have all your ducks in a row. You're still unbeaten. You're still undefeated. Still have a high ranking. You're very much in the driver's seat, not just to get to the Big Ten championship, obviously to get to the college football playoff as well. So, ducks in a row. Let's get rolling.
Now the spread is 31 points for Maryland. Michigan is against the spread. Over/under is 54. So there's not much to predict, except Michigan. Michigan's dominance still has yet to be seen after last week. I'm pretty sure it'll reappear when they play the Maryland Terrapins at home. So let's get to the predictions right away. I'm going to predict Michigan to win 42-17.
Very fair score. By the way, before I mention my score, I also wanted to bring up the fact that William Likely, if you want to go Will for short, to go on the punning nature of his name, one of the best players for Maryland, defensive back / punt returner. He was lost earlier this season due to an ACL injury. So, in terms of a needed weapon to help kickstart Maryland, that would surely be needed in a game like this. They don't even have that luxury. So, all the factors that I mentioned before, plus this one about Will Likely's injury, I'm going to say it's close to your score, Taylor. I think, out of respect for DJ Durkin, I think maybe Michigan doesn't get the 40, but their defense will have a much better game than what we saw in East Lansing last week. So I'm actually going to go against the spread here. I'm going to say Michigan 38, Maryland 13.
Okay. All right.
If they get a touchdown late to cover the spread, I wouldn't be surprised. Then I'll tip my hat to them. But I think DJ Durkin is going to have his defense coached up a little bit to where they'll keep it as close as possible, but Michigan's defense will eventually override it. And like I said, it's going to lead to a score about 38, maybe 41, but I think Maryland's going to score no more than 13.
Yeah, I have to agree. So that covers Maryland at Michigan. Now to Michigan State at Illinois.
Touchdown, MSU!
Spartans are 2-6 and 0-5 in the Big Ten. The Illini 2-6 overall, but they're 1-4 in the Big Ten. Kickoff is at noon on ESPN inside Memorial Stadium. The 46th all-time meeting between the Spartans and the Illini. The last time those two met, MSU knocked out Illinois 42-3. Head coach Mark Antonio is 3-0 all-time against the Illini and 2-0 in Champaign. But the Spartans are missing freshman quarterback Brian Lewerke, out for the rest of the season with a broken tibia. So we mostly expect senior Tyler O'Connor to start at quarterback. So that's not Brian Lewerke is only a freshman and he hasn't still's got a long ways to go, but he's not great, but he's pretty good. So that's gonna be a significant loss to the Spartans offense.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that really you can make a preview about is the fact that not just certain statistical categories. You could say Michigan State's offense is very bad for a reason. 79th nationally in rushing yards per game, 107th in terms of points scored per game, and we're just talking the offense here. But it's not as bad as I would say compared to what Illinois brings to the table. Forget about the easy stats. Let's look at S&P Plus. Where again, refer to footballoutsiders.com or just search up on Google S&P Plus. Michigan State's offensive ranking at S&P Plus. They're at a 76 compared to Illinois, which is at a 103. So yeah, you would have to think that Michigan State, as bad as they are, their offense cannot be that inept. And I think as we saw last week against Michigan, given the right situation, let's say L.J. Scott has another big day again. I get it. This could be a start of a trend. Last week Michigan, the week before that Maryland. So you could say he's finally getting a kick in the ass from whatever source of inspiration, whatever it is. It's finally helped because he's looked his best. This is his best that he's looked since the Notre Dame game back in September. So that could help out the Spartans in a big way. Now the question is, what's the quarterback situation going to be looking like? Most likely, you would think they would go back to Tyler O'Connor, even though, I would be very uneasy about that if I was a Spartan fan. This season's been a loss, an absolute wash anyway. So it doesn't really matter who's out there throwing throwing the rock at the QB spot. Can Mark Antonio find a better way to not make very irrational decisions this week and compared to what he did, the disastrous outing that he had, in my opinion, last week against Michigan? It's going to be very interesting to see that. Not to mention the fact that it's in Champaign. It's Michigan State for some reason. They just haven't, I believe they're only, obviously one of their, they only got 2 wins, but one of them is at Notre Dame, so they only have 1 road victory this entire season. That means they have lost on the road to teams like Indiana, to teams like Maryland, for instance. So it's almost, even though ESPN Football Power Index or whatever, the fan pick, whatever, has Michigan State, factored as almost 60% chance of winning this game, I still don't trust it, mainly because we've seen how awful this team has performed. It's flat out awful in certain instances. You give up 54 points to a Northwestern team that scored 7 against Illinois State. Okay, you lose to BYU. You get bitch slapped by Wisconsin. You get embarrassed by Maryland. Yeah, you put a fight against Michigan, but let's be honest, that fourth quarter was as close to garbage time as you can get. You know, if it wasn't for Michigan taking their foot off the pedal, that probably would have been 40 instead of 30. So I say this to say that whatever we know of Michigan State, we know. The factor is, it's just a matter out of, let's just get this season over with so we can, if you're a Spartan fan, put it behind you. Know that there are definitely better things to come. But the season's been a nightmare. Comparing to where they just were at the end of last year, Big Ten champs in the college football playoff, all this national attention. Now to see this happen, it's very sobering to say the least. But I wouldn't say, you know, panic time yet. You know, you had your faith and trust in Antonio so far to this point. It shouldn't start wavering now, even though he had a very questionable game against Michigan. He still earns benefit of the doubt thanks to the resume and what he's been able to build upon during his tenure here at East Lansing. So it's about as close to a toss-up as you can get without saying it. Even though, you know, like I said, the match predictor has MSU almost a 60% favorite or 60% chance, I would say, and the spread is MSU -7. But those numbers seem awfully fishy to me.
Also, the past 2 games, sophomore L.J. Scott has rushed for 267 yards on 42 carries, 133.5 yards per game, and 66.4 average per carry. He collected 128 yards on the ground, including a career-long 48-yard rushing touchdown at Maryland on October 22nd, and followed that performance with a season-high 139 yards on 22 carries against number 2 Michigan, the nation's top-ranked defense, on October 29th. Scott leads the Spartans in rushing yards with 603, 75.4 yards per game, and carries for 150, and carries with 115, and is tied for first with 4 rushing touchdowns. Illinois is coming off a 40-17 loss to the Minnesota Golden Gophers last Saturday. They've lost 2 games in a row after grounding the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 24-7 on October 15th. Freshman Jeff George Jr., is currently their starting quarterback because senior Wes Lunt, their primary starting quarterback, is injured. There's no timetable for his return. Junior wide receiver Malik Turner is another guy to watch, and so is junior running back Kendrick Foster, the other key guys on offense. Turner has 35 receptions for 523 yards, 14.9 yards per carry, and 65.4 yards per game, with 4 touchdowns, and Foster leads the Illinois rushing attack with 450 yards on 77 carries, 5.8 yards per carry, and 56.2 yards per game in total rushing yards. 56.2 rushing yards per game, in other words, with 5 touchdowns, ranking him 9th in the Big Ten in scoring with 5.3 points per game. Foster also averages 24.2 yards per kick return to rank 6th in the conference in all-purpose yards, 116.3 yards per game. Redshirt freshman running back Reggie Corbin adds 411 yards on 53 rushing attempts, 7.8 yards per carry, 51.4 yards per carry with 1 touchdown. Senior linebacker Hardy Nickerson leads the Illini defense with 75 tackles, ranking him 3rd in the Big Ten and 25th in the Football Bowl subdivisions in tackles per game with 9.4. Nickerson also adds 2 sacks and 2 interceptions defensively. Senior defensive end Carol Phillips leads the Big Ten and ranks 7th in the FBS with 1.6 tackles for loss per game, 13.0 total, and for 65 yards. 13 total for 65 yards. as well as third in the conference and 36th in the nation in sacks per game, with 3/4 of a sack per game, 6 total, posting 34 total tackles. Senior punter Ryan Frayne is 7th in the Big Ten in punting with a 40.8 yards per punt average, with a long of 67 yards, his longest, and 1 of 5 punts of 50-plus yards, and has 11 inside the 20-yard line. Sophomore place kicker Chase McLaughlin is 5th in the conference in field goals per game with 1.25, making him 10 of 13, 76.9%, with the longest of 53 yards, as well as 19 of 19 on PATs, extra points. So as you mentioned, Ed, the spread is 7 for Illinois. The over-under is 51. Predictions, the majority of the nation has actually picked Michigan State to win this one, despite their 2-6 record. Illinois is 2-6 as well, but Mark D'Antonio has had experience beating Illinois, and I think Michigan State will stay undefeated against Illinois somehow. Yet on a close one, but I think the Spartans deserve, even though they suck this year, they've worked hard. They deserve a Big Ten win. I'm going to pick them to win 28-24.
Part of me is wanting, seeing what I've seen in the past 6 weeks. Maybe the Michigan game could help somewhat of a turning point for them, if you want to call that, in hopes of them trying to finish the season strong. But I doubt that's going to happen because you got games against Ohio State and Penn State still to come. So this is one of your last many chances to get a victory. You have a much easier time next week against Rutgers, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For this week, oh God, let's go 35-28 MSU. I do not feel confident in that pick. I'm just telling you, because when you see them shit the bed against Indiana, against Maryland, against BYU, at Northwestern,
yeah.
it does not give you the confidence to think they can go in on the road. By the way, right, most of those losses have been at home. It does not give you the confidence to think that they can go on the road and beat a team, even though, this, you could say, make a case they're arguably weaker than them. But still, it's almost, don't show me the baby, but show me the labor at this point. So, but I'll stick my neck out and say MSU just because, and I'll even give them the 7 to cover, but that's not a confident pick. I will say that.
All right. Well, at least I'm not feeling confident either, but the Spartans are due for a Big Ten win, and I believe their head coach, Mark D'Antonio, is too good to go winless in the Big Ten. That's the point.
Well, they got 2 good chances this week and next week, because after that, I don't see it. So they better take advantage of it. Otherwise, they would risk potentially finishing with a 2-10 record, and that is something even me, who might despise the MSU fan base with a passion, Mark D'Antonio as a coach does not deserve to have that on his resume. So for his sake, at least, I hope MSU pulls it together at least for a little bit. Tries to, get to a more respectable 4-8 record. I know it's not saying much, but seeing how they've done this year so far, getting the 4-8 would be an absolute a major accomplishment.
I believe so. All right, that's it for the Big Ten. So it's time for my MAC roundup, starting with my Central Michigan Chippewas.
Touchdown, Central Michigan!
Well, after the loss to Kent State at home, they go to Oxford, Ohio, and play the Miami, Ohio Redhawks, who are 3-6 and 3-2 in the MAC. That kicks off later tonight on a Friday at 6 o'clock on CBS Sports Network. For the Redhawks, sophomore quarterback Gus Ragland has completed 59.5% of his passes with 571 yards and 6 touchdowns against no interceptions in the Redhawks' 3-game winning streak. He currently stands at 69 for 125 passing for the season with 1,154 yards and 8 touchdowns against 4 interceptions for the season. Sophomore running back Alonzo Smith Alonzo Smith, looking at ESPN.com, sophomore running back Alonzo Smith has 133 carries and 481 yards and 3 touchdowns. And James Gardner, a sophomore wide receiver, has 35 receptions for 581 yards and 5 touchdowns. Miami's defense has allowed 349.8 total yards, 217.3 passing yards, and 132.4 rushing yards. My keys to the game, I'm going to explain it to you thoroughly. CMU's running game and offensive line have both been inconsistent throughout the season, and they haven't changed. Also, senior quarterback Cooper Rush threw 3 interceptions last week against the then 2-6 Kent State Golden Flashes, and the Chippewas lost that game with a game-winning field goal as time expired by Shane Hines from 35 yards out. The Chippewas really need to clean that all up. The running game and the offensive line are going to have to play a lot better than they have in the last few games, and Cooper Rush once again needs to cut back on throwing interceptions. Period. The spread is 4 for Miami, Ohio. The over-under is 47, according to ESPN.com. The matchup predictors, 69.7% say CMU will win. 30.3 say the Redhawks will win. I'm gonna come up with a surprise prediction and say the Redhawks 31 and the Chippewas 13, because the Chippewas are going on the road, and again, the running game and their offensive line still can't find a way to be consistent enough, and they're both awful, and Cooper Rush still keeps throwing interceptions. It just keeps killing and hurting the Chippewas constantly, and that's why they've lost 2 straight.
Yeah, I hate to say it, Taylor, but I think you might be right on this one. I know it's tough to do because it's your team, but you got to be fair when the time calls for it. That score, I think I'll be a little. Yeah, I'm going to give them a little bit more hope. I think they score one more touchdown or get a few more points set. So they'll make it a tease. I think it'll be the same 31 score by Miami, Ohio. It'll be 23 or maybe 24 CMU. But like I said, that offensive line and running game, it's hard enough to get that going when you're on the road at home. But to try to do that on the road, not an easy task at all. So as much as I'm sure you probably don't like to hear it being said, it's not a good look for your boys. So I'm going to say, Miami, Ohio wins this game.
I have to agree. For the 23rd ranked Western Michigan Broncos, who are 8-0, they play at the Kent State Golden Flashes, who are 3-6 and 2-3 in the MAC. That kicks off next Tuesday at 7:30 on ESPN2. Of course, it's going to be a rout. Western Michigan will win 56-10 over Kent State on the road.
Here, Here, I'll go ballsy for you. I say Western scores 60 or at least 60 and holds Kent State to under 17.
Kind of like 14?
Not much.
Kind of like
yeah,
14
let's
points.
go 14 and 10. How about that? 66-10.
All right.
Roll the boat, baby.
Oh, man, yeah.
Oh, man.
That's more like it. And finally, Eastern Michigan Eagles 5-3, 2-2 in the MAC at the Ball State Cardinals 4-5, 1-4 in the MAC. That also kicks off Tuesday at 7:30 on CBS Sports Network. Here are the players to watch for. Brogan Roback, 113 for 180 for 1,387 yards, 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Sophomore running back Ian Erickson, 120 carries, 461 yards, 5 touchdowns. Sergio Bailey II, that's junior, 43 receptions for 614 yards and 3 touchdowns. For the Ball State Cardinals, sophomore quarterback Riley Neal, 157 for 261 in passing for 1,700 yards sharp, 7 scores and 9 picks. Sophomore running back James Gilbert, 210 rushes for 1,142 stripes, 11 scores. Senior wide receiver Kavan Mabin, 55 receptions for 645 yards, no touchdowns. He's still due for a touchdown this season. They need to get him one. My prediction, Eastern Michigan has a better record than Ball State. I'm thinking it's going to be a close one. I'm going to pick the Eagles to beat the Cardinals 27-23.
Like what you're thinking. Agree that it's going to be close, but I think the score will be a bit more surprising. I say Eastern 17. We'll take this one 17-14. But won it by a field goal.
All right. So that wraps up all college football for now. For this week on the Football in the Mitten preview, now it's time to go to the pros.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
The Lions go to U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and take on the 5-2 Minnesota Vikings Sunday at 1 on Fox. The headline of the week, Vikings offensive coordinator Norv Turner resigned earlier this week. And it was a surprising move to the Vikings coaching staff and their roster. He was pretty good, too.
Yeah, former head coach of notably of the San Diego Chargers, amongst other teams that he's been involved with throughout his coaching career.
Yep. And before he resigned, the past 2 weeks, the Vikings scored 20 points total and averaged 270 yards of offense in 2 losses. So they've lost 2 in a row, actually, but they still have a good record, which is 5-2. The Lions' offense, quote unquote, hurt themselves, according to tight end Eric Ebron, who had 7 catches for a team high 79 receiving yards. They hurt themselves in the 20-13 loss to the Houston Texans this past Sunday. They're looking to get better, is what Eric Ebron is trying to say. They're trying to put more points on the board than 13. They're going to have to do it on the road inside a tough U.S. Bank Stadium in front of a hostile crowd, a hostile Viking crowd, just like they used to do inside the old Metrodome.
Yeah, it's maybe a different venue, but the same, atmosphere obviously is still there. I think Eric Ebron was trying to be nice as possible without throwing his head coach under the bus. But let's be honest, Jim Caldwell's idiotic decision-making hurt his team more than what the offense was able to put together. If Jim Caldwell made better coaching decisions, that would have gotten the ball in the hands of his offense at least one more time or two, then we're possibly looking at a different game here, a different outcome than what we saw against Houston. But moving on to the point of what this team needs to do, how can they combat this, try to, gets some momentum that they had with the 3-game winning streak, and then it abruptly stopped last week with the loss to Houston. Well, it's simple. You need better play from the offensive line. Period. End of story. Can't have Stafford running for his life out there. You got to find a way to set something. I know it's tough to do against this defense, especially this defense, but if you can't get present any type of reasonable threat of a running game, it's going to be hard to do, because this is what most likely the best defense this Lions offense will be facing all year. So trying to do that with a lack of a running game that you have already will be putting a lot of pressure on Matthew Stafford. Now, don't get me wrong, he has the ability to put things together, but he needs enough time on the field, i.e. converting third downs, i.e. setting the tone with manageable gains on first and second down, which would include having some sort of respectable running game on those early downs. So that way, when you get to those third downs, you'll be in a much more better spot. You can do whatever you want. Stafford, obviously, you can see now this year, he has the ability to run. So if he has a chance where he can scramble, get you a few yards on the first down, that'll be key. Also, conversely, for third downs, that's the one thing that the Lions defense has got to improve on without a shadow of a doubt. It's what has killed them in these losses, or practically for the whole entire year. It definitely killed them last week against Houston. Targets for their defense, whether it be, I wouldn't say their front four, it's got to be their secondary. Their secondary's got to they got to do whatever they can to make sure Sam Bradford doesn't get too hot, because once again, they made Brock Osweiler look incredible last week, okay? And we know how much of an overpaid player he is. So imagine what a guy with a little bit more talent, I would dare to say, it's Sam Bradford could do. Okay, if Brock Osweiler can complete nearly 70% of his passes against your defense, imagine what Sam Bradford can do, an actual proven quarterback, what he can do. So that's one key right there. It's going to be, again, if Caldwell can find a way, listen, I don't mind the aggressiveness of going for it on fourth down on certain occasions, but it's just certain reasonable, sensible calls that you as a head coach, you got to make, or you got to try to go after, i.e. throwing a challenge with a challenge flag on a play where it could get your offense the ball back, a game which your offense was struggling, for instance. Need I mention the onside kick? Your head coach is such an important asset to your team in terms of strategy and game planning and how you execute on the field. Jim Caldwell's got to coach a much better game if the team has any chance of winning this game, winning this one. So those factors: establish a run game, do better on third down, and please, for the love of God, have better execution with coaching decisions. Those are the keys to victory if you're the Lions.
But of course, Jim Caldwell remains to be comatose and dysfunctional and ignorant toward the media, and he continues to make those dumb decisions every game. And you would sense that it's going to continue through this Sunday at Minnesota and beyond their bye week and throughout the rest of the season, before hopefully his pink slip comes to fruition. So the players to watch for are quarterback Sam Bradford, of course, 135 of 203 for 1,442 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Running back Jerick McKinnon, going to have to fill in for Adrian Peterson's cleats for the rest of the season again. 68 carries for 217 yards and a touchdown, not much. Stephon Diggs, the wide receiver.
Under 50 against this defense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Stephon Diggs, the wide receiver, 35 receptions for 466 yards and 2 touchdowns, 466 receiving yards. Pretty impressive. Defensively, the Vikings. What do you see in the Vikings defense?
Well, as some of the stats alone, it speaks for themselves. The fact that they give up under 100 yards per game on the ground lets you know that they have a very ferocious defensive line, to say the least. Points allowed per game only at 14, just under 15. that tells you that their secondary is pretty damn good as well. So a very, very stout defense mixed with, I would consider, an adequate quarterback in Sam Bradford makes you a very potential, obviously, playoff contender, which does in many ways shows how much of a big hurt the Adrian Peterson injury was and continues to still be. Because I think you can honestly say, with Peterson, they possibly, not only do they look like the favorites to win the NFC North, especially since they beat the Packers this year earlier, they look like a possible Super Bowl contender. But that's if they had Adrian Peterson. So, they just had to settle for, either a wild card team or one of the division winners in the NFC. But still a very, very good team. Remember, they were a missed field goal away from getting to the second round last year against Seattle. So, they definitely have what it takes to get back to the playoffs, so that lets you know what kind of team that they're facing, led, of course, by their defense and the fact that I think they, even though they lost Teddy Bridgewater, another crucial key injury, they managed to salvage that with the acquirement of Sam Bradford in that trade. So things look good on both ends for Minnesota, and that speaks to a reason why they're favored against this Lions team this Sunday.
So, what are the keys to the game?
Well, I thought I mentioned them earlier. I think you thought it was for offense. Well, it kind of speaks for the Lions as a whole. For third down defense, third downs, not only the Lions got to stay on the field for their offense, third them in situations, but first they got to get to manageable and reasonable situations on third down. Third down defense is what's killed them constantly this year. So that's one thing they can improve on. It needs to be that stat right there against the Vikings. Try to win the turnover battle. Sam Bradford is not the most reliable quarterback in terms of protecting the ball. So he's looking fairly good this season, I would say, compared to most years. But still, find a way to win the turnover battle. That would be very key. Like I mentioned before, coaching decisions, coaching executions. Caldwell, if they have a chance of winning this game, they need a better coaching job from Jim Caldwell. So those are my keys.
All right. Well, the Lions didn't turn the ball over at all the last time in a losing effort, but their offense really needs to rev it all up, and they need to start catching the ball more than dropping the ball. That's one of my keys. That's pretty simple. Now to the predictions. I'm going to predict the Lions are going to give it a good fight. They're going to, if they improve their offense, they're going to make it close because the Vikings have a powerful offense, especially under center with Sam Bradford. I think that's going to be a little too much. I'm going to predict the Vikings to win 35-31.
You see, I expect the Vikings to win also. I just don't expect the Detroit's offense to score that much because they had a hard time scoring against Houston's defense last week, and that's a team without J.J. Watt. How the hell do you think they're going to do against this Minnesota D? So, maybe they'll be lucky to get to 20. I doubt it. I say Minnesota 30. I say Minnesota 31, Detroit 17. I think, like I said, that secondary is bad enough as is. You may be without Darius Slay for a second week in a row. You got Theo Riddick, but again, that's just one player, trying to help out, against a very stout, stingy Minnesota defense. So the offense may look a little bit better, but that defense is going to get gashed all up and down the field on Sunday. So I say Minnesota 31, Detroit 17.
All right. Well, that is our football in the Mitten preview. So now it's time for 5 questions. Are you ready?
Ready as you are, Taylor, so just go ahead and let them rip.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker.
Question number 1, can the Michigan Wolverines return to their dominating form this Saturday?
I think they have a good chance to for a few reasons. A, they're not facing an in-state rival would be giving their 150% effort, not just 100, 150%. their place. A lot of you could say hyped up emotion and whatnot. B, you're going to be facing again this Maryland in some instances may be a slightly better version of Michigan's fact that they have a couple more wins, but let's be honest, they were just 3-9 last year. So credit, like I said, credit DJ Durkin, but they're not that good of a team when you line them up next to Michigan. So there's that got no worries on that end. Plus, C is back in Ann Arbor. You're not on the road, back in a more comfortable setting where you tend to have your better performances. So those three reasons alone, besides a multitude of other things, leads me to believe we're going to see a much more better, dominating vintage Michigan performance this Saturday.
I'd have to agree.
Next question.
Question number 2.
Hopefully
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, hopefully no hangover game, but like I said, with Jim Harbaugh as head coach, he should be able to keep his team mentally sharp and mentally and very focused.
Yep. Question number 2, can the Spartans finally get a win in the Big Ten Conference?
It'll be, I'll just say this, it'll be much easier next week because you're playing Rutgers. If you lose to Rutgers, God help you, which is why, again, that speaks to why I'm a little bit uneasy about this Illinois game. If it was at home, sure, but it wouldn't be that much because we've seen how awful they played this year. But I think they have a chance to pull together. It's a very uncomfortable pick, but they have what it takes to pull it off. If we see another good LJ Scott performance this week, they have a very good shot. So between this and the horrible team that they're playing next week in Rutgers, absolutely they have a chance. But, once you hit OSU and Penn State, look out. It's going to get ugly. But other than that, between these two games, Illinois and Rutgers, yes, they absolutely have a good shot.
Next question.
Question number 3, is the inconsistency of the Central Michigan Chippewas running game and offensive line going to affect their season?
Well, it already has, to the point where, you thought, oh, wow, look at the start that they've had and the big win against Oklahoma State, the 3-0, 4-0 start, whatever it was. And then, of course, it's gone off the rails since then. We're a bit of a, not off the rails, but roller coaster, more apropos of a term to describe here. So, yeah, obviously, with your offensive line, it sets the tone, obviously, for the run game to get better and better protection to take less pressure off your quarterback so you wouldn't be forced into making idiotic and stupid and dumb decisions, i.e. turning the ball over. So, without doubt, it has affected their season. Unless they can make an improvement, it's going to be the biggest reason why they probably either didn't go to a bowl game or didn't go to a bowl game where that they deserve to. Let me try to say that better. They went to a bowl game where one they should have been at much better if they had a couple more wins under their belt, primarily due to their offensive line and running game play.
Yep, I can see that too.
Next question.
Question number 4, can the Lions take advantage of the Vikings' problems in order to get a win on the road?
No, because A, it's on the road, B, it's the Lions, and C, this is a very stout Minnesota defense that will keep them in the game throughout. So I just don't see it happening. Sorry, but no.
Yeah.
Next question.
Finally, question number 5, what can cornerback Jonathan Banks bring to the Lions' defensive table? We forgot to mention him. He was acquired in a trade earlier this week for a 2018 7th-round pick, which went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who took a pounding to the Atlanta Falcons earlier on Thursday night, just a bit earlier in Tampa Bay at Raymond James Stadium on Thursday Night Football on NFL Network. I believe it was 43-26 with 59 seconds left in the fourth quarter, the last I saw it. So the Falcons apparently won that one.
Well, other than, making sure Walter White's drugs get delivered on time, not that much. But in all seriousness, it's just for depth. It really, that's all it is. Darius Slade, their best corner, is out. So they need to find some way to fill the hole any way they can. So let's get a guy with experience, that type of depth. It's merely to get a body out there, let's be honest. So that's the move they made this week for Banks.
Yep. So that is our 5 questions segment for all the listeners and fans out there. If you want to answer those questions, just replay the episode and answer them in the comment bank below this episode. And that wraps up episode 238 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, the football and the Mitten preview. Ed, thanks so much again for your help. I'll talk to you again on episode 239, the next installment of the weekly recap, probably Wednesday or Thursday, which will include a surprising trade that the Tigers made, sending Cameron Maben to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
Not too surprising if you read between the lines and see the MO of Chris Illich, but we'll get to that display of horse shit when next week when the time comes.
Yep.
That's my preview, by the way. So get ready for an ethering of Chris Illich.
And the Red Wings losing to the Flyers again on the road. Still haven't when they had a chance to cap it up in regulation and then in overtime, they lost in overtime.
And the Pistons looking like shit in Brooklyn against the Nets. So yeah, whoopee, a trifecta of terrible. But hey, at least the Cubs won the World Series.
Yep. So that monkey's off everybody's backs in this world. So I'll talk to you next week, either Wednesday or Thursday, for the weekly recap.
Looking forward to it, Taylor. Take care. Have a good night. You too, listeners.
Thank you, Ed. And before we sign off, I want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media. Have their friends share that as well. And follow me on Spreaker as Taylor Phillips online at Spreaker.com, because I want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth podcast is in search of local advertising sponsors. If anyone has a business that's interested in sponsoring this program, you can follow Sports Radio Detroit on Twitter at Sports Radio DET and send them a direct message or email them at sportsradiodetroit.com in the contacts section. Also like their Facebook page and join their Facebook group. And finally, find their podcasts available on iTunes and Podbean. For Ed Smith, I'm Taylor Phillips. If there's anything you fans want more or less of on our podcast, please let us know. Follow us on Twitter at DT2Phillips with 2 L's and at EdSmith313. Also like our Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, and join our Facebook group. And also a reminder that we could be having our first official logo of the show coming soon sometime. So keep an eye out for that, folks. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Bon appetit.